kids need to know that smartness isn't something that you're born with. You're not a math person or an English person. You're not born good or bad at any academic topic. The grading system that we currently have just imposes a closed mindset in the classroom. It doesn't inform students about where they are on the learning curve, what they've accomplished so far, and where they're going. The good news is that there's been a lot of research recently that supports something called the power of a growth mindset. A growth mindset means that students know that they're on a learning curve. They know where they are on a learning curve, and they know where they're going. Before, when a student would fail a topic or fail a test, it felt like it was game over. It was the final decision on whether they could or could not do whatever was required of them for their grade. In this different kind of model of education, in a growth mindset model, students just understand that they're on a learning curve, that it's okay to fail. In fact, that failure is just an opportunity for learning, for trying something new out and assessing maybe where you went wrong. You can learn a lot from failure, and when we look at the old paradigm of assessment in the classroom, getting the wrong answer is simply, well, it's simply regarded as wrong. You don't get any extra points for creativity, trying new techniques, taking risks and being willing to fail, or maybe even coming up with a partially right answer or a novel way of solving a problem. There are so many things that aren't measured in our current assessment tools that really are essential to learning and being adaptive. So Carol Dweck said it really well in her video, The Power of Believing That You Can Improve. It's a TED video that I really like. And she talked about a Chicago school, and in that school, students who had failed any kind of course or who normally would have been given a low mark were given the mark not yet, because not yet gives students a path to the future. It isn't the end. It isn't a closed system. So when we're on a learning curve and we get feedback that says we haven't yet attained our learning goal, that's just the beginning of a conversation. The beginning of the conversation of how we're going to get from what we know so far to what we want to learn about in the end. So the beauty of a not yet philosophy, of a growth mentality or climate in your classroom, it gives students the freedom to fail. In fact, failure isn't even failure anymore. It's just a learning opportunity. So it sounds really warm and it sounds cozy, and I think a lot of parents have just thought that it was just being soft on kids, that it wouldn't really produce students that were achieving at a higher level. And the good news is that studies and science, good old science, has demonstrated that how students feel about themselves, how they view themselves, dramatically impacts whether they are able to fulfill their potential or not. And in the new curriculum, we're talking a lot about critical and creative thinking, about applying new strategies, about willingness to take risks. And as long as we're testing at an A, B, or C, or we have standardized tests that don't really take into account individual learning, we can't really expect our kids to benefit from what we now know about learning. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is defining what a growth mindset is and maybe what a closed mindset is. And I'm going to take that directly from examples provided by Carol Dweck. In brief, a fixed mindset or a fixed mindset attitude in your classroom, it perpetuates the false belief that you can be born like good or bad at a certain topic, that you're either good at math or bad at math. Basically, in a fixed mindset classroom, if you're not succeeding, if you're not doing well, then chances are you're going to try and avoid educational goals and avoid facing more failure. It really just tells kids that things are immutable, that they can't really change their futures or their outcome. And surprisingly, kids that get high marks are high achievers, they're A students. They're always looking for a reward. A lot of the time, they're working towards that next A. And really, it doesn't really tell us or them what they're really capable. It doesn't really tell us what their actual understanding of any particular topic is. So again, even if students are your top students or your top performers, it tells us that they might have a certain amount of fixed knowledge, but it tells us nothing about their process, and it tells us nothing about what their interests are or what their potential is. In a growth mindset classroom, we have a completely different focus. Um, we understand that smartness or intelligence can be gained through perseverance. It can be gained by finding something that you're interested in and by being able to face and learn from your mistakes. That's probably one of the number one points the research says, is that kids in a growth mindset atmosphere where their assessment actually is used to further their success for themselves, it's just used as information. Those kids go on to accomplish more things when they're adults. They go on to higher education, and their mental health is, well, it's more solid than those of us who grew up in a closed mindset atmosphere. Their confidence is just that much bigger. And we talked earlier about what the greatest risk factor was to students' achievement or failure in the school system. And I asked you guys whether you thought maybe it was the family, socioeconomic status, maybe being from a marginalized group. Maybe those factors would be the greatest determinant of whether students were successful or whether they made it to a higher education level. And the really surprising but incredibly good news is that in growth mindset classrooms, kids who historically had performed at all-time lows, whether it was a group of Native American students outside of Seattle or some of the poorest students in Los Angeles from schools that were just famous for their dysfunction. When scientists and researchers instituted growth mindset practices and assessment in those classrooms, those students became some of the top students in the United States. So I don't know what the research says about Canada, but there's very, very compelling research that is telling us that a lot of our assumptions about what people are capable of and who's capable of what, well, they're just not based in reality. So all I can really say is that growth growth mindset in our classrooms is just a non-optional situation. If we actually want to prepare people to be lifelong learners and people to have confidence in themselves and become smarter meaning that they're able to focus, they're able to find new solutions, and they're able to persevere and keep their confidence intact when they make mistakes, then change is pretty much the only way that we can see students develop these characteristics. And so in parting, I would love to talk to you about assessment methods and different kinds of assessment styles that we could use in classrooms that would encourage growth mindset, but it's really not in the scope of this video. So in parting, I guess what I wanted to say was that the current grading system, the provincial exams, for example, that kids have to take, standardized exams in general, or working towards an exam, those kinds of education systems, they're giving students inaccurate messages about their potential and really what they're capable of. And those kinds of negative messages, fixed mind messages, not only are they scientifically incorrect, they have the power to cause long-term damage in children. So it's time that we all learn about new assessment methods and we bring a positive growth mindset practice to our classrooms. Thank you for listening.